Hello, welcome back to the desk corner. Welcome to a new video and happy fall. In most of the world, it is now officially fall. And yes, I have pulled out my Halloween jack-o'-lantern and decorated for Halloween far too early, but I probably will save showing you guys that for another video when we're actually in October. So, as you might be able to tell, I am sick. I sound probably close to terrible, but today I really wanted to get into the fall spirit, so I dragged my pathetic self out of bed, grabbed my Arches watercolor paper, the cold pressed one because I've learned the hot pressed one and I don't get along as much for watercolor. I use it more for watercolor pencil now. Anyway, I attempted to slice this paper in half with my paper cutter. It's uneven, that's okay. What we're going to do today is paint some fall related things. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do for the second one. I already have the idea of a fall autumn forest for the first one, so that's what we're going to start with. What is that? Gosh, sorry, I'm a bit off my rocker today, but I pulled out my Sennelier watercolor paints. I have the 48 set, and I haven't used these in a while. Let's go ahead and jump straight into the painting. After a long time, I finally learned when doing the wet on wet technique to mix all my colors first, have them ready, and then wet the paper, because in the past I've kind of gotten ahead of myself, wet that paper, and then it pretty much dried by the time I went to put any paint down. So I'm using a lot of oranges, yellows, and reds here. I think I was using my size 8 or 12 brush. So I'm using a larger brush, but not huge, and I think I have the issue of maybe not creating big enough strokes, brush strokes, with looser paintings. I'm really trying to learn how to do looser paintings, and this was not one that ended up being a loose style painting as much as I wanted it to be, but you know, we all learn from things. So I let that dry and then I painted in, well, not completely, I let it dry a bit, and then I painted in some faint branches or tree trunks in the background and a few branches coming off of them. These are supposed to be kind of in the background and not super dark yet. I will darken some of them up later. And then once that dried, I went in and started adding a layer of more detailed leaves. But this is kind of where the issues came in here. I think my brush was too small at this point. I should have still been creating those bigger strokes to make it look more loose style, and I have a lot of trouble creating the loose style because I'm really detail oriented, and this is just something I'd like to work on. So I have been watching some YouTube videos on how to get this loose style, and hopefully with a bit more practice I can get it. Nevertheless, I had so much fun with all these reds, oranges, yellows, greens, fall colors, and I had a fun time painting this even if my technique wasn't perfect. You could see I'm creating some of the grasses and bushes too. I kind of made the mistake of not painting in anything in that pathway, so I end up doing that later. It's just a bright white path for now. Oh well. So at this point I start painting in the bigger branches in the foreground and or the bigger tree trunks and branches. I keep saying branches. I'm using neutral tint, and I end up using a bit of black later too as I darken that area up, but for now I'm just using neutral tint, which I think is a pretty good color. Oh, there I go, darkening it up still with the neutral tint, which is actually a really nice dark shadow shade. I am so happy that my Sennelier set includes neutral tint because it's just very helpful. And there I am, kind of darkening up those foreground tree branches and creating that look as if there's leaves blocking some of the branches. And hopefully I was successful with that. I'm not exactly sure how the leaves themselves turned out. Not sure I'm super happy with that, but I think the tree branches were alright. I decided to darken up some of those background branches too. You can see that I'm still using the neutral tint, just not quite as dark back there as I used for the branches in the foreground, and then I realized that there's supposed to be some more tree trunks back there, so I just kind of painted those in. We are just going on a whim here, apparently. I realized that none of those trunks in the background go all the way up when some of them should, so I painted them all the way up to the top. I do have a tiny little border I created with my tape, which was strategically this kind of like flannel pattern tape that reminds me of fall, so I thought it would work perfect for all the paintings in this video. Also, something that is pretty funny, but as you guys know, I was pretty sick when I was painting this and kind of absent-minded, maybe the word is. So I painted that tree branch way too long. It goes right over that pathway. It is very long, and I don't even know if a tree that small can support a branch like that. But you know what? It's my painting, so in my painting, it can. And then I decided to just give a rest to those branches and start working on the leaves again. Lots of bright colors. I'm pretty sure a couple of my friends here on YouTube that like to use bright colors will appreciate this painting because it is much brighter than my usual work. Because some of you guys know, if you've been watching me for a while, that I prefer neutrals, sometimes pastels, earthy tones, and I decided to just go all out with the bright colors. Then I painted in those fallen leaves. I actually like this part. I think on the left, the fallen leaves look kind of cool. I darkened them up later on as I let that dry. One thing that I can't get over with watercolor is how frustrating it is how you paint something in and when it's wet, for a while it looks like how you want it to. But then, when it dries, it's so much lighter and transparent, and it's just annoying, and I never know where to stop with layers because I'll like how it looks when it's wet, and then it dries, and I feel compelled to go over it again. I think there's a thing with overdoing watercolor. So I didn't overall love how this painting turned out, but we're getting the quote-unquote worst one over with first. I promise it gets better from here. Here's how this one turned out. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments. I decided to just leave it at this point. For this one, my sketch is already done. As you guys can see, I jumped right into it because I actually sketched it out while one of my layers from the previous painting was drying. I get so impatient waiting for the layers to dry, but I know it's important. So for this one, I decided to use watercolor pencils. It's a little bit more in my groove, if you will, using pencils, and I wanted to change it up a bit. And I decided to draw out this really beautiful reference photo of a sunflower kind of resting near or on a pumpkin, on the side of the pumpkin. It's a really close-up photo, so you only get to see the top part of the pumpkin. And I just thought it was really gorgeous. I have not painted or drawn a sunflower in a really long time, and the pumpkin of course makes it fall themed, but it's just a nice combination of colors. Again, some brighter colors, although I do use some more neutrals in here. I'm using more earthy greens. The thing about the background is I do go back to fix that top part later. The leaves, I just made a muddy mess because I added too much brown in my first layer. Yeah, it's just a little bit hard sometimes to control the water coming out of your water brush. And there you see I'm working on the pumpkin. I was really excited. Of course I have to paint or draw a pumpkin every year. You can't just not. So this is my obligatory pumpkin painting. I might do something closer to a jack-o'-lantern as we go into Halloween. I have the tendency to skip fall and go straight into Halloween though. So this year, you know, I have to do this fall video because I have to acknowledge fall before we jump into Halloween. I believe I'm using raw umber to define parts of the sunflower, add some shadows in, and then I'm just using some really bright yellows and oranges to create the really pretty petals on the sunflower. It's just so gorgeous. I think I kind of nailed the texture of the middle part of the flower. I was worried about that, and I think I actually nailed it pretty well. There is a little bit of a funny part up at that left hand side. I'm not really sure what's going on there. The petals are just clumped together in a weird mass. I decided to just kind of leave it. I tried to fix it a little bit later, you'll see. And then for the stem, I'm using like juniper green and some earthy brown green tones and yellows to just make it look very, I don't know, just not dirty. I don't know what the word is for it, but I wanted it to have an array of colors, neutrals, and not just be brown because I want this to be somewhat of a colorful photo. there I am going in on my second layer. Of course, I had to wait for it to completely dry. Very important if you are doing watercolor or watercolor pencil, make sure that you don't work on a new layer until the previous one completely dries. Super important. And then I went in, I think that's burnt sienna, burnt ochre, something like that, to darken up some shadows for the sunflower. And then of course we need to do another layer for the pumpkin. Get some more shadows in there, some brighter oranges and everything. I decided also to do a final layer on the stem here too, just to deepen that up a little bit. And I didn't want to add too many layers to this because sometimes you can make a mess with watercolor pencil, so I left it like this, and this turned out to be my favorite painting. Let me know what you guys think about this one. And finally, I was inspired to paint some wet on wet fall leaves. I just need to practice my wet on wet technique, and I can't say that this project helped me all that much. I really kind of messed up those pointy edges, and I might have overdone it with the red when I wanted it to be more yellow, but you know what? I think that it turned out to be pretty. How can a fall leaf not be pretty? I've been inspired. I've seen some other artists painting their fall leaves and things like that, and so I decided this would be good practice. And I actually did scan my sketches for this. I'll probably put like a real-time version on Patreon or something like that, because I did scan my sketches out, and yeah, this would be something that I could voice over and put on there, so watch out for that if you are there on my Patreon. Link is down in the description. For the second little leaf, I wanted to do something different, make it more green and lighter, and I was a lot more careful with this one. I'm using a smaller brush, still using that wet on wet technique, but I really wanted to focus on those details in this one, and I think it paid off in the end. This one turned out better than the other one did, if I'm being honest, because the other one was a little more of a mess and I wasn't as focused on the little details, but I really liked how this one turned out. And by the way, these were just little scraps of cold pressed watercolor or hot pressed watercolor paper that I had sitting around, and that's why I decided to make them useful. I hate having those little scraps of paper there and you just don't end up using them. Once my layers dried, I painted in some of the veins of the leaves, and then you'll see that I'm gonna actually jump in and go back to work on the other leaf in a second too, because this whole time I was waiting for that one to dry so that I could add another layer to it. But it took a while for it to dry, of course, because of how much water I had put down initially. So I re-wetted it, added some more darker, deeper reds, and tried to give it some more depth. I don't think this painting was a complete failure. It definitely wasn't my best, but I think that it was still fun for me to do. I thought I would show all the paintings here at the end. We have some fall leaves here. The one on the left came out better than this one. This one I think could still use some detail work when it dries. So if I decide to not be lazy and paint in the veins of the leaves properly when this one dries, then I'll have to include a little picture clip or something at the end to show you guys, but as of now, I'm just keeping it like this because I'm kind of tired of looking at it. So we have our two fall leaves. Here is my watercolor fall forest, which is colorful, not exactly in the style that I was going for, but that's okay. I ultimately decided to keep it in this video anyways because look at all those pretty fall colors. I just couldn't resist, even though it's kind of a mess, but this is the type of forest I would like to visit at the moment. I'm in California, Southern California. We don't really get too many of these trees that change colors. We have some, but it's not really as much as I've seen in some other places. Alright, so there's that one, and then by far my favorite of the bunch is this sunflower and pumpkin done with watercolor pencil that I just obviously seem to do better with pencils, but I really like the combination of flowers and pumpkins, and I thought the sunflower coming right out at the end of summer just matches really well with this orange pumpkin. And I've always kind of wanted to try painting a sunflower, try to get that texture right in the middle there. I think I had a lot of fun with this, and I'm actually not going to go in and add details in colored pencil. I'm resisting that because I want this to look more like a watercolor piece, you know? Sometimes I want to have that watercolor look to it, and when I go over and add details with colored pencils, it becomes a little more of a mixed media colored pencil looking piece, and I kind of go overboard. So we're just gonna leave it at that. I want you guys to comment which one's your favorite. I was also thinking of doing an Inktober inspired piece just to practice my fine lining skills a little bit. A piece that is using mostly fine liners, which I have quite a few of those and I just don't use them too often. So if you have any ideas for what I would do with that, let me know. I'm not going to be doing the full Inktober, it's just a little bit much for me at the moment. I don't think I'd be able to squeeze it in. And I think that's all for today's video, you guys. And I will see you guys in the next one. I've got a messy desk to clean up now. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye, I'll see you in the next video.